What if the ocean didn't want you to leave? And it began returning things you lost, including people who never should have been found. Welcome back to my channel, Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. We are boarding after midnight. When the decks are quiet, the halls smell like lemon polish and brine, and the ship's heartbeat hums through your bones. From cabins that answer when no one is inside, to emergency drills that gather passengers who are not on any manifest. Every story tonight is a mystery waiting to unfold. Which story creeped you out the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you feel a chill at your back, that is just the sea reminding you it has no walls. Story 1. Cabin 414, occupied by nobody. The phone on my night desk rang from cabin 414, a room that does not exist for guests. Its red message light pulsed slow, a tiny lung under plastic. The ship hummed like a sleeping animal, engines beating through carpet and bone. Lemon polish floated over brine that leaked from the world outside. The air conditioner clicked like a metronome learning to breathe. I lifted the receiver and heard the ship-wide goodnight tone stretched in, as if replayed underwater, followed by a whisper that sounded almost like my name, and then a soft click that felt like a swallow. I am Mara Demas, night purser on the Halcyon Tide. 2 weeks from a final evaluation that could keep me in blue and gold or put me on a bus. I am also the sister who convinced Leo to sail on standby because I could watch out for him. He is 19, all elbows and good luck. My job is tidy solutions. I fix small messes before anyone sees them. At 2 a.m., I prefer glitches to ghosts. So I told myself it was a routing error, and then the call log printer typed 2:14 a.m. and my name anyway. Housekeeping had already logged a complaint, knocking from inside 414 at exactly 2:14 a.m. nightly like a ritual. That time mattered because the brass bell in our corridor chimes on the quarter, and the second hand stutters at 14 like it knows a secret. The smell was wrong by the back counter. Lemon over salt, cleanser poured into seawater, unknown before danger. I reminded myself and swallowed the metallic taste that comes before a bad idea. The printer spat a welcome letter addressed to nobody, cabin 414, and the page felt warm like a cheek. I took a junior steward and went to deck 4, because quiet fixes keep careers afloat. I opened a maintenance ticket for a bathroom fan, reported running in a sealed, gray-shaded cabin. Bringing it to paper felt like biting a battery. Choices of work. Wake security now and make noise, or walk the corridor and keep it small. I chose small. Storm practice was due before dawn. My supervisor slept 3 decks away with her radio face down. The corridor lights began to tick toward night mode, and the carpet swallowed sound. Outside 414, the lock light blinked red, then green, then red again, not in any rhythm I had ever seen. It felt wrong in my teeth, like chewing foil. The keypad declined my code with a small sound, as if a fingertip tapped from the other side. The carpet edge along the baseboard was damp enough to print my flats. The air wheezed cold. I pressed my ear to wood and heard a bathroom fan behind a closed door and a patient drip I could not place. The steward whispered that the door breathed when I did. I logged a master override because everything we do leaves a trail, and trails can save or burn you. The system started a 60-minute countdown to the camera auto overwrite on that corridor. The blue exit light would go to sealed in 20. The ship rolled long and soft. A ceiling speaker cleared its throat and repeated goodnight with a watery hitch. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from 414. I pressed play and listened to my own voice say, occupied like a joke I would deny later, then heard something answer in the dial tone. When I pulled up the corridor camera, it did not buffer. It argued with time. On the little screen, A version of me was already halfway down the hall, wrist angled to block the lens as she keyed a code. Future me ducked into 414. Present me stood at the corner, watching my own elbow vanish into a door I had not touched. The steward said my name like it might break. I decided not to wait for the world to catch up. I swiped. The lock hummed in a pitch that matched the engines, and the door unsealed. Cool air curled around my ankles. Not warm steam, but the clean cold of a walk-in fridge that had learned the ocean. I set my radio on the hinge for a live line and stepped inside. The room looked showroom perfect. Bed tight, runner straight. TV on. It displayed the corridor camera with a 90-second delay. So I watched myself enter while I was still at the threshold. The shower sputtered to life behind the closed bathroom door and never warmed. The air conditioner clicked like a child counting and then forgot the number. I crossed to the desk phone because phones make rules feel true. 3 messages waited. The first was my half-laugh and the word occupied bursting like a bubble underwater. The second was a ship-wide tone stretched so thin it spoke a sentence I could not catch. The third was silence with weight, like a person holding their breath beside me so I would not hear them. I turned to the porthole and found a wet handprint on the inside of the glass. It was smaller than mine and low, as if the person had been kneeling. Leo. The name arrived before thought and made everything worse. I radioed Deck 8 for a discreet scan of 8,212. No knock, just a read. The answer came back clean. No motion. The muster bracelet assigned to Leo pinged idle in his cabin. My console chimed in the same breath. A wristband had just authenticated on the safe mode reader inside 414. The number was Leo's, which is not the same as saying the bracelet was. I remembered borrowing his band earlier to test a tap-to-pay glitch and felt heat crawl up my neck. The corridor lights shifted to night mode and everything went blue. I told the steward to hold the door with his foot. He said he already was, except the door kept inching forward like a polite elevator. The ship rolled again. The ceiling panel above the bed ticked as if shrinking from cold. The lemon polish smell sharpened into cleanser poured into salt. I lifted the panel with my fingertips. Cold drops pooled in my palm. A life jacket lay sideways in the dark void, waterlogged, tagged E. Rosales and a smear of permanent marker. Emilia Rosales. I had seen that name where I should not have, in a memorial drawer no bigger than a recipe box where we keep the paper tokens of people who never cleared final muster. 8 months ago, during drill, she never scanned. Officially, she disembarked at the next port. Unofficially, no one I trust believes that. I told myself the jacket was misfiled after refit. The battery taste returned. I lowered the panel and told the steward of radio security. He waited for me to say please and kept waiting. Jonas arrived damp and smelling like brine, eyes bright in the way of someone who had been running 10 decks while convincing himself he had not. His satchel dripped onto the carpet. The TV showed the corridor delay in its endless loop. Jonas looked at me, then at the panel, then at the TV. In my head a shape formed that I did not like. He had a master key and the access to scrub a log. His hands could put a signature where it did not belong. He stepped into the bathroom and returned with a careful face. I asked him why he smelled like the docks. He lifted his satchel. Inside sat a broken bucket and a rag that had learned 100 cleansers. Housekeeping spill, he said. Engine control confirmed his alibi by accident over the radio. They needed him in camera view during each 214 event. Jonas tapped the reader. That wrong red then green rhythm is old firmware we never had, he said. Thinking aloud, his words gave my fear a hinge. Maybe no one living tampered with it. Maybe the ship was remembering itself. The radio flattened to a carrier tone like a horizon. A storm drill sealed the corridor fire doors with a hush like padded vaults. The blue exit light slid from ready to sealed. Communications failed in steps. Help delayed. Allies thin. My bypasses stacked on my phone in a neat audit list that could end me at sunrise. A ship-wide note about unusual access chimed and made the steward flinch. Choice pressure found my wrists. I opened the reservation screen, checked myself into 414, and fed my card to the encoder until it sang. I put the card to the reader. The lock answered with that wrong heartbeat, red then green, then still. The phone kept ringing. I let it ring twice because I was afraid to hear my own voice, and then I did. Hello, I said, recorded in a room I had not entered yet, because the 90-second delay was not only pictures. Time in here had the viscosity of cold brine. Jonas mouthed "do not," and then tightened his jaw like he had bitten a wire. I answered anyway. My voice on the line asked me to confirm. Inside, the wrongness was a matter of degrees that add up. The bed runner aligned with the carpet pattern, not the bed. The TV showed me outside with Jonas, then showed me inside repeating motions I had not performed. Each moment delayed and predestined. The air conditioner clicked on 2 and 3, off on 4 like a child counting. The bathroom door rattled once and stilled. The shower ran ice cold. I opened the panel again. Lemon brine dripped onto my wrist. The life jacket strap lay like a patient hand. The reader log number belonged to Leo, but the plastic on my palm was a blank I had cloned with his triple beep. I did it in a hurry. The system does not care about wrists. It cares about beeps. For months it had hunted a missing confirmation. It found a sound that fit and followed it to my desk. The TV obeyed when I told it to stop copying me, which meant I had already told it 1 minute from now. My skin prickled. The room waited like a breath held under a wave, and I waited with it. At 2:14, the knocking started again, not at the cabin door, but from inside the bathroom. Paced and patient, a habit practiced until it was furniture. I thought of Amelia standing here during drill, listening to the tone but not hearing the instruction, waiting for someone to count her. I thought of a tired hand hiding her things because explaining that absence is heavy. I thought of the sea saying, "I will keep what you miscount." The TV showed me lift the phone. Presemi watched and hated how ordinary I looked. Engine control, radio through static. A voltage surge would roll through the lower decks in under 3 minutes while they trimmed power. Cameras rebooting with new clocks. That was my clock. The TV showed me lift the handset, speak, and hang up. Choice wait again. If I confirm muster now, the count might release Leo. If I did not, the system might find him instead because I had taught it his beep. I picked up because apparently I already had. Cabin 414, guest present, I said, and the line clicked. Something reversed that should not reverse. The printer near guest services woke in my head like a phantom sound. The corridor camera timestamp ticked forward. To free Leo, someone had to remain assigned. The life jacket strap tightened around my fingers as if measuring. The intercom spoke accounted for in a polite recorded voice that made my teeth hurt. On the TV, the door opened to a corridor with no one waiting. Jonas looked from screen to ceiling to me as if counting how many names a room could hold. Jonas took the clone bracelet and said he would go to Leo. I told him not to come back. He said that was not how this worked and slipped out. The door let him go like it had practice. Alone, the room sounded larger, as if a wall had moved an inch. Power rolled. The engine thudded. The TV bowed and returned with a fresh clock that showed the cabin empty for a blink. The phone displayed a missed call from my own extension. I pressed redial and listened to ringing that counted stairs in the dark. Dawn thinned the air to blue-gray that felt clean. My phone chimed. Mismatch cleared, the audit said. Head count complete. The cabin loosened by a fraction, like a hand that had done its work. Jonas returned my badge in silence. He placed a clone bracelet on the desk between us, as if setting down a meal neither of us could eat. He did not ask what I said into the phone. He already knew. I signed 3 disciplinary forms that all used the same word: probation, the price of keeping quiet long enough to be heard. Leo slept late and avoided my eyes. He said he dreamed of a bell that counted him, and then lost him, and then counted him again. I told him he was fine, because he was... I opened the memorial drawer and slid Emilia Rosales' slip to the front where it could see light. That is not procedure. Sometimes you let something breathe before you fold it away. The midnight room service bill posted to my account for a tray I never saw, 2 waters, and a covered dish marked duty. 2 nights later, the printer woke on its own. The new night purser brought the page like it was burning him. Welcome, it said. Gesmara Demas. Cabin 414. The date was midnight. The signature was mine, and the digital curse of the ship uses when it is sure you are you. I told him it was a glitch and that I would handle it. He used both hands to pass me the paper and stepped back. The lemon polish note in the air found a salt edge again. Somewhere in the ductwork a fan breathed and then forgot how. Someone or something was tidying after us. I went to deck 4 and stood under the blue light. That means a door can still open. I pressed my ear to the wood. The engine heartbeat hummed steady as work. The key light blinked once. Red then green. That wrong rhythm we are not supposed to own. On the other side of the peephole, breath fogged the glass with patience, bloom and fade. No knock, no word, just a sense of room that knows my name the way a ship knows its ports. I told myself it was air moving. You can tell yourself anything at sea. When I looked down, a maintenance ticket had been slid under the door, already stamped complete, requesting my signature for work inside 414. The service closet CCTV showed me standing with my palm on the wood, but the screen time read 1 minute ahead of my watch. A cold drop fell from the ceiling seam and vanished into the carpet at my toe. I did not open the door. I did not walk away. I counted to 90 and waited for the picture to catch up. It did not. The corridor bell thought about ringing and stayed quiet. I would like to tell you I solved it, that I found a board flash wrong, that the ocean keeps nothing it is not owed. The truth is smaller. The system wanted a body where a name had gone missing, and I taught it mine. It sends me notes when night is deepest. That is how hauntings work. You make space for a thing, and it moves in. If you pass a door that hums, do not answer. Or, if you do, leave a name you can afford to lose. Story 2. Muster on deck 13 at 3 in the morning. The muster alarm wakes the ship like a hand on a throat. But the tone is wrong. Half a note flat and held too long. As if the steel itself is singing. I know that sound by heart. The clean major third that means practice. The harsh minor that means run. But this is neither, and my body knows it before my head does. I lean out into the corridor, and the air tastes of diesel and seaweed, like a pier after rain. And above me the foghorns answer in a low complaint that feels older than our ship is supposed to be. I am Adrian Keller, assistant cruise director, and tonight I am acting, which means no one older stand between me and a report that will follow me to shore. My supervisor took the last tender ashore before midnight. He told me to keep the drills tight, the laughter easy, the expenses low. Promotion, he said, and I could almost see the gold bars that turn a voice on the PA into law. I am good because I count. I balance. I do not improvise. If you have ever worked a deck at night, you know why that matters. The first text pings my device before I reach the stairwell. People are gathering on the top deck. They write, but there is not supposed to be a top deck above 12. Our blueprint skipped a number. Many do. We call it superstition when the ship is full of sunlight. We call it design choice when the sea is calm. The alarm keeps calling that strained note, and then the wind folds it back in the hull, and I am running because every second I lose now I will have to explain later. Deck 13 exists when it wants to. The elevator will not take you there. You have to climb. At the last flight, a door stands open, and beyond it a wet steel deck waits under fog lamps that smear their own light into halos. The air is colder here, thick with mist that beads on my lashes. I hear footsteps that do not rush, only arrange themselves. When I step out, I find a crowd that has already formed lines, life jackets snug, faces lifted to hear instructions I have not given. Their jackets do not match our brand. Some carry logos from cruise lines that folded before I was born, the kind of names you see in maritime forums where men argue about rivets. The whistles on their collars are bone white with age. The laminated cards they hold are scuffed and curled, names printed in fonts that my printer cannot produce. A woman with salt stiff in her hair looks at me with a relief that hurts. "We were never dismissed," she says, as if she has been waiting to tell me that for years. I bring the scanner up because the world makes more sense when numbers agree. The first wristband I touch refuses to read. The second blinks, failure. The third pretends it is not there. I ask them to try again, and they do. So calm it makes me colder. Across the deck, the fog lamps bloom brighter and dim, as if someone is breathing shallow against a glass. I scan my own badge to open a muster function, and the screen that should say crew greets me with access level, passenger. The PA clears its throat. "Adrian Keller, please report to muster station 13. It says, and the off-key note hums under my name like a mistake that refuses to resolve. I could pretend I did not hear. I could say the wind blurred it, but the crowd hears it too. Heads turn toward me like compass needles. A little boy in an orange jacket starts a wave. He stops mid-motion and tucks his hand back into the strap, as if someone taught him not to draw attention. The fog thickens when I step forward to speak. Security answers my call as a tired voice and a promise to review cameras. I tell them deck 13 and earn silence. We do not have that deck, they say, and it is more a policy than a fact. On the CCTV feed, the camera that should look across the steel expanse shows a bare roof. No lines, no faces, no lamps. I angle my body so the fog lamp catches me full in the face and holds still, just in case the lens can be convinced. On the screen, I am nowhere. They tell me to stop pranking logs and handle it. I mute the channel before I say something I will regret. A text lands while I fight for calm. From Sophie. She is my fiancée, traveling with me this contract to see if the life I build at sea can hold two people. I had taught her the safety codes because that is how I talk when I am nervous. She writes, "I dreamed you were on a deck that is not real, and you waved like you were sorry, and the fog took you over the rail." She adds a heart. The heart feels like a countdown. I try to dismiss the crowd with the kind voice I use for seasick families and missed excursions. They do not move. They are not rude. They are not confused. They are obedient to an order I did not give. The fog presses thicker when I question them, and the lamps bend halos that trap faces inside circles of their own breath. The alarm tone sounds again, that failing note that should have been retired with bad wiring and lessons learned. It slides under my tongue and tastes like a story I half remember. On the far side of the deck, a lifeboat begins to lower itself. No crew on the winches. No command from the bridge. The ropes strain and sigh. Fibers singing as they take weight. It creaks like it wants to be in the water. The lines of passengers turn to face it as one. Their movements are so crisp that I think for a second we rehearsed this earlier, and I forgot, and then shame pricks me for wanting any explanation that would save my face. My supervisor finally texts, "Good job handling the Phantom drill. Close it before corporate sees. Close it. I should pretend it never happened. I should collect jackets and send people to cabins with blankets and tea." A child steps out of line and places a laminated card in my hand. It is not ours. The edges rough my skin like wet paper dried wrong. My full name is printed on it, cabin number below, a font from no template I own. I turn it over. The emergency instruction on the back uses terms I have only read in maritime history. Muster clerk, tallyman, lifebelt instead of life jacket. I do not say anything, because the crowd already knows. The radios go thin. It starts as a hiss that might be wind, then turns to flat carrier, a straight line that says no. The PA coughs from a loop that catches on half words and tiny gasps. In that chopped breath, I hear Sophie's name called once, the syllables threading through static as if someone hid them under a floorboard. I run for our cabin, heart hammering in a rhythm that does not match the alarm. Our door is unlocked. The bed is unmade. Her wristband is gone from the counter where she leaves it to shower. I try to locate her app and watch it flinch. The duck that should be in our room jumps to the far side of the ship and fixes at station 13. The system confirms her near instantly, obedient to a call I did not place. The fog at the porthole looks like someone breathed against a glass and spelled a letter there, but when I touch it, my finger only finds cold. You cannot argue with a safety circuit that believes it is saving lives. You cannot pull rank on an algorithm that thinks you are late. I go back up because leaving her an account is worse than any report I will write. The fog is thicker now, ground glass in the air, turn my breath into a small private weather system I have to walk through. The crowd watches me like a class that has studied a teacher. So long, they know his next word before he speaks. A man with a jacket that says a cruise line that died with the 90s nods once at me and not unkindly. We were never dismissed, he says again, and the fog eats the rest. Old habits save you when logic shakes. I go to the safety office and dig into the archive that our newest staff calls the attic. We keep stupid things there. Outdated signs, retired procedure cards, a drawer of laminated names that were sucked to be recycled. The alarm tone we use for drills is a fixed interval, but once, decades ago, it was not. It drooped a half step down on older ships after a fire its fried amplifiers shore could not replace. Survivors learned that wrong tone is the sound that saved them. They waited for it again. The laminated cards on deck, 13 match cards in a binder that should have no weight left. Faded names I have seen in lists that say missing, presumed. I hear a footstep behind me intense, expecting security or my supervisor ready to write me up for trespassing in policy. It is Sophie. Her hair is damp like she walked through a cloud. She says she feels pulled to the upper deck, and she smiles like she knows it is silly, and then her face folds when she sees my expression. This is not a prank, I say, and hate that I have to. I admit I wondered. She knows my codes, my rhythms. She helps me rehearse speeches and mocks my stiff hands until I loosen. She could have lured me with an alarm tone off a phone. Security would believe it. I would be a punchline. Red herring, if you like stories. I pull up the CCTV log to prove to both of us that she moved where I think she did. The footage shows her in our cabin the entire time, asleep, blue light on her cheek. The timestamp ticks forward. The alarm sounds. Her body does not stir. The foghorns speak again. A voice at the end of the hall calls our names the way the PA would in an emergency if no one was sure we could hear. Sophie closes her eyes and says she dreamed of this exactly, The way the alarms droop, the way the deck smells like wet chain, the way my voice sounds when I am about to choose work over love. I want to explain the head count mismatch logic. The way the system will always fight to close a gap, even if it has to pull a name across a line to do it. I do not get the chance. The PA finds a clear channel and says Sophie Martin, muster station 13, in a tone that is patient and fatherly and wrong. Her wristband vibrates against her skin, even though she holds it in her hand, the battery humming a note I feel in my teeth. The laminated card with my name warms in my pocket like an animal. I understand then what price the ship wants. It needs a body, not just name. It needs a person who answers when called. It has already decided who that is. Choice pressure feels like stepping into a current while pretending you can still stand. I take Sophie's hands and tell her go back to the cabin, lock the door, and wait 10 minutes. She looks like she might argue, then looks at me like she has just remembered who I am, and she nods. If you have ever been loved by someone who trusts your voice more than their fear, you know what that nod costs. I go back into the fog alone. It folds around me like a curtain taking its time. The crowd makes space for me. That is the worst part. They did not grab me or beg or weep. They know where I belong in this grid. I hold my scanner to the station reader and ask to be counted. The system accepts me instantly. Passenger 140. The display says, and I do not know whether that number means anything except that it is shaped like a mouse surprised. In my ear, the locator app pings. Sophie's wristband blinks free, as if a hand has let her go. I breathe and taste something like rust. Immediate consequence keeps the world simple. She is out. I am in. The bigger fear is a slope that appears under my feet the second I try to step back. The alarm tone begins to hum from the crowd in unison. They do not sing words. They sing the interval itself. That drooping half step, a ritual of breath and pitch that makes my chest ache. The lifeboat drops another foot. The ropes sing again. The winch shivers as if remembering a heat long past. Fog curls under the keel like fingers testing a pulse. On my hip the radio wakes and dies. The bridge wants to know why a boat is moving. They want to know why the counter shows a full station where a deck should not be. They want to know why my supervisor's signature appears on a report that has not been filed yet. The laminated card in my pocket seems to thicken with moisture, edges softening. In preparing to run, I hold it flat against my thigh as if warmth can keep it clear. A little girl in a jacket that doesn't fit smiles tentatively and mouths thank you. If I do nothing, the ship will look for the next closest name to trade. I know that because I am the one who wrote the memo about cascade effects last month. Systems move. They balance. They fill. The last thing I want is the PA calling Sophie again, softer, as if asking her to be reasonable. I step toward the lifeboat. The deck is slick, and my shoes do not grip, so my body has to learn a new path that belongs to the ship, not me. The crowd pivots with me. Rows neat, a choreography anyone who drills has in their bones. I stand with one hand on the rail and one on the line and feel my future peel away like a decal that did not bond right. I think of promotion. I think of the way Sophie laughed when the steward put a folded towel on our bed shaped like a stingray. I think of the corkboard in the safety office with the old laminated cards for missing at sea that no one looks at because looking makes the air heavy. I think of the child who gave me my name back like a ticket. Here is the twist, and I do not claim I deserve it, only that it fits. The deficit is not a number that floats. It is a shape and a story. It was always me. Every time the alarm went off in the dark for a drill no one scheduled. Every time I answered call faster than anyone else. Every time I spoke the words aloud to soothe a nervous crowd. The story learned my mouth. The laminated card did not predict the future. It found a groove where someone had run their hand over my name until the plastic remembered. I step into the lifeboat. The ropes tremble and then release like muscles letting go. The boat dips, sways, and then slides down into fog that looks solid enough to walk on. The water below shows nothing, not even the stripes of reflection you expect under lights. The passengers do not follow. They only hold their lines and hum that note as if completing a song. The boat rocks. The fog closes behind me like a hand that has decided to keep what it is holding. I sit because standing is something land people do. Inside the boat is an inventory that makes an ugly kind of sense. Water packets stamped with dates from old years. Flares outdated. A hand-crank light that coughs up a glow like bruise yellow. And under the bench, laminated safety cards, a stack stained to the color of tea, edges wavy, names blurred. I pull the top one because I hate not knowing. The plastic sticks and peels. Survivors, tallies, dates that do not match. Not ghosts exactly. More like people whose story never got its period. The hum from the deck fades to wind. I call the bridge one more time and recite the dismissal phrase that belongs to the modern world. The radio opens and eats my words. The boat takes a shallow lick of a wave from a swell that should not reach this high. I try the old words I found in the archive, the ones that call you muster clerk and ask you to temper the count by witness. The fog flexes. I feel rather than see the ship, steel and light and sleeping tourists, a city that floats because we pretend we know what the water wants. I speak the only command that matters to me. Dismiss, I tell them. Dismiss my fiancée first. Dismiss every name not mine. If you must count, count me and let go. I do not know who I am bargaining with. The rules are old, and I am small against them, but something listens. The boat jerks as a line tightens from above. The winch whirs like a throat clearing. The fog thins by a degree that feels like a window cracked on a stuffy room. The deck appears in brief slats of light. Sophie will tell me later. She woke with salt on her lips and a memory of a man's voice saying her name as if teaching it how to sit down. The locator log will show her band moving back into our cabin with a neatness that looks like code rather than feet. Security will play me a clip of Deck 13 in the hours before dawn. Plain roof, no lamps, and they will hold my gaze to see if I blink. The lifeboat rises. My hands hurt where the rope burned. The fog stains my cuffs the color of old charts. When the keel kisses its cradle, the boat stills and time shakes itself like a wet dog. The ropes slack and the lock pin seat with thud I feel in my knees. The crowd, if it was here, is not. The fog holds empty space as if it has set our shapes aside. Carefully, for later, I step back onto the deck and the world accepts my weight. The PA stops humming. The wind remembers how to be only wind. I have the laminated card still in my pocket. My name has already faded. Morning finds me writing a report that refuses to sit still on the page. The log shows a successful test signed under my name at 3 o'clock, a time that makes me want to laugh. There's a photo from a camera that does not exist. A thumbprint blur of me standing alone in a rectangle of white with my arm lifted, like a man waving to a stranger on shore. HR emails Sophie a note about my transfer to a safety role on a different vessel, and the template includes 2 lines of condolence someone never deleted. She brings a laptop to me, and we read it together. The subject line says, "Welcome aboard." The body says, "Thank you for your years of service." The signature block is my supervisor's. We do not speak for a long moment because you can learn a lot about a person from what they do not say when the world misnames you. I take her hand. Her skin is warm. The smell of seaweed and diesel rides the air through the ventilation like a rumor. Someone down the hall is laughing at a breakfast joke I cannot hear. In the safety office, There's a corkboard where we pin reminders and joking memos about sunscreen and smiles. There's a corner no one dusts where the old laminated cards hang. They are supposed to be records, not relics. On that board, a new card appears. It is mine, water stained at the edges, the font of compromise between what we use and what the ship remembers. Someone has pinned it under a thumbtack with a blue plastic head. If you look closely, you can see a bubble trapped under the lamination like a breath. I will not say I am gone. I still walk the decks. I still count heads. I still write scripts for shows and apologize to honeymooners who booked the wrong view. I am careful now with my name when the PA clears its throat. I answer less quickly. I count my seconds and save them for nights that feel thin. The off-key alarm tone sometimes rides a wind when fog rolls in, and if you've ever heard this, you know that feeling, the way every hair on your arm goes alert as if counting too. Sophie asked me to bring her something from the office for luck. I thought of the laminated card, but left it pinned. Some things should not come home. Instead, I brought the hand-cranked light from the captured inventory. We keep it in a drawer that sticks. Sometimes at night, the drawer is already open, and the crank is warm. That is not a story. That is how humidity works at sea. That is what I say out loud, because words shape rooms. The fog finds our porthole in gray whirls that look like fingerprints. On clear days, I stand by the rail and watch the wake spread behind us in white lace patterns. A woman with salt in her hair, who may or may not be alive according to paper, stands beside me sometimes and watches too. We do not speak. Not every mystery wants your mouth on it. If you ever sail this route, and the fog climbs up like a cat and holds, and a lifeboat creaks as if remembering, and the PA calls a name in a tone that feels older than your ship, do me a favor. Look at your laminated card. If it has your name, hold it tight and decide which story you want to live. If it has mine, pin it back on the board and tell the fog I heard it. You do not need to save me. I made my choice on a deck that does not exist, and choices echo. They always do. We are dismissed. I tell the wind when it asks, and sometimes it believes me. Other nights it only hums that wrong note as if to say not yet. Now we move to the third story, and if you have breath left, keep it close. Story 3, Channel 66. Do not tune. The first thing I saw when the storm leaned against the glass was myself, asleep on my own bed, on a television that was supposed to be off. The picture had that blue-white glow older screens make, clean at the edges and fuzzy in the center, like a memory trying too hard. The cabin smelled faintly of ozone, the way the air smells after you pull a plug with the power still on, and somewhere behind the drywall a hum had learned to count. I should have turned away, but I watched because curiosity pretends to be courage until it is not. I am Helena Cruz, traveling alone to prove I can. There is a petty freedom in buying a single ticket with no one to negotiate around. I had promised myself I would sleep early and wake to sunrise on an empty horizon and show no one the photo. Instead, the storm rolled in with a polite knock, and the decks closed under slick tape, and the walls began to feel like a held breath. The remote in my hand would hop from channel 65 to channel 67, like it was stepping over a crack in the floor, and I told myself it was a quirk I did not need. You know when you sense a thing before you admit it. The numbers on the television were small and stubborn. They said 2:59. The clock on my nightstand said 3:06. The lag was a pocket of time that felt thick. On the screen, I watched myself stir and failed to wake. I looked calm in a way I do not trust. If you have ever seen your own sleeping face, you know it looks like a stranger who borrowed your skin. The storm drummed a slow rhythm on the balcony glass, and the hum behind the wall rose half a note. I called guest services because naming things helps. The line clicked, and the operator said good evening in a voice that sounded like it had already carried 24 small emergencies. I asked about the television and the storm and the way the remote would not stop on 66. I did not say the number out loud. The operator spoke over me so gently I almost thanked her. "Do not tune it," she said, and the line snapped to a flat tone like a horizon. The hum in the wall kept time. The air tasted metallic, like the first lick of battery. My neighbor on the other side had complained earlier about voices through the walls. She said they were not the good kind, the kind you hear and laugh about later when you explain it was a family on the other side. Up late with a movie, she said they were counting. I had smiled and told her the ship had 1,000 lungs, and sometimes the vents talked. In my drawer now, with a pen and notepad sit rolled in a tidy pocket, a sticky note waited that I did not write. "Do not watch past 3:14, it said, in block letters that could have been mine if I had been taught by a stranger. I held the note like a receipt I could return. The channel number warmed in my hand when I pressed the remote, as if plastic could sweat. The screen blinked, cut, and then found the image again, a thinner slice of my own cabin like a camera leaned into a peephole. On the bed, I watched myself reach for the phone and say words I had not decided to say. The sound was low, like the television did not want to wake me. I watched my own mouth form the softest of low, and then heard the operator's voice answer, "Do not tune it," from inside my room. I told myself the ship had a training loop. In the 80s, they had systems for everything. Drill footage to show new crew how to tally heads. Cabin cams to test housekeeping standards. Ghosts made of manuals and workarounds. The storm could have tickled a wire and woken something that was never meant for me. That is not the same as saying it was harmless. On screen, me hung up, and me holding the remote did not. And that is the space where dread moves in. The picture showed 10 minutes ago as if it were faithful, but the hum learned words I did not know. "Prove it," I said to no one, and raised my hand to the television in a small way that felt like a joke I would deny later. I counted slowly to 600. The hum behind the wall scrabbled up a step, like a choir finding a key. At the end of the count, the on-screen me waved back, but she smiled with the corners of her mouth, a little tilt I had not felt. That smile landed like a thumb on the back of my neck. I mouthed nonsense at the screen, a silly syllable, and she mouthed open. I had not said the word, and yet there it was on her face like a stain that would not wash out. This is the part where you become the person you use to shake your head at in other people's stories. I called again anyway. A technician arrived with a polite knock, name badge tucked crooked under his collar, tool pouch gray by real work. He set his case on the bed without asking and turned the television off, then on, then off again as if power itself might be the superstition. He tuned to 65, then tried 66, and his mouth made a little line when the remote hopped and refused. He pulled a small service remote out of his pocket and typed a code. The screen found the channel, like a dog finding a scent. The image bloomed. It showed the cabin again, calm and blue, and two people stood near the bed. One was me with my arms folded in exact stubbornness my friends say is reliable until it is not. The other was the technician, his side profile precise. I turned to look at him, and he wasn't there. The case was closed. The bedspread had an impression, like someone had rested their tool pouch and then lifted it away. My tongue stuck to my teeth. The air went thin. On the screen, the technician leaned in and said something behind my shoulder that I could not hear. I asked the front desk for the technician by name, because I am practical in the first minutes of panic. They checked logs. No one by that name was on duty. No service call had been routed to my cabin. They asked me if everything was okay, and if they should send security. I told him I was fine because there's a point where saying you're not fine makes you sound like the kind of person who keeps problems as pets. The hum behind the wall lifted again, half a step, like someone a room away kept tuning a guitar to a pitch old speakers remember. At 3:14, the sticky note asked for something in the picture shifted. The delay twisted like a heel on damp flooring. The screen showed the balcony door with a slice of night at the pane and a smear of water that crawled at the edge. On screen, we walked to the latch and set my fingers there. The handle turned and the door side opened just enough for black to have a shape. Someone outside leaned in. I could not see his face. He was a set of shoulders and a glossy outline of rain. I watched my own mouth say yes, though I could not feel it. In the room where I stood, the handle on my real balcony rattled once as if fingers had found it. The storm made wind hands, and wind can do that, but it felt like knuckles. The sticky note in my palm had softened with sweat. I read it again, as if the ink would change. Do not watch past 3:14. The television did not care what paper I held. It showed a future in the small intervals my heart did not want. Tick. On Screamy, opened the door wider. Tick. A shape crossed the threshold without weight. Tick. The handprint on the inside of the glass erased itself by degrees. Phones are anchors. Mine turned to static. The emergency channel cut in with a loop that said remain calm in a calm voice that taught panic by example. The Wi-Fi indicator dropped from 2 bars to none. The corridor outside my cabin had lost voices, as if the storm knocked the air off a table. I tried my key card in the hall just to feel a handle move under my hand, but the reader blinked amber and stayed locked. The only door that wanted me was mine. The only option the system would grant me was in. The television waited, courteous and patient, and not mine. An instant report slid under my door with a papery hush. The paper was thick, like placemats. The header said Safety Office in a font we all forget until it tells us what to do. Guess Helena Cruz, it read. Incident resolved. Below that, a line that made my stomach go small. Deceased. The timestamp was 3:24. A signature I could not parse had finished the form with confidence. I told myself it was a prank. I told myself I had slept and someone slipped it as a joke. Then a whisper came from the television speaker in my own voice. Let me in, it said, and the walls learned to hear. I needed the why because a story without a why eats nights. I found in the corner a forum archived badly on the ship's network, a thread from the 80s about training circuits and cabin surveillance for drills. Channel 66. Someone had written, was a loop used to show crew how to assess a scene without opening a door. It was fed by a camera behind a peephole, pointed out, not in, and sometimes storm interference made it take a neighbor's feed. The person who wrote it signed with a name that matched the technician's badge. The thread ended with a moderator note that said user removed. I assumed the worst first, that I was watching myself die 10 minutes ahead, that the world had learned a script that could not be revised, that obeying would be like signing a contract written in salt. It felt plausible and ugly. It also felt too simple. The more I watched, the more I noticed the changes. The smile that did not belong to me. The way the on-screen me never quite matched my fingers. The timing that made my heart beat a metronome, and then pushed it slightly to the left. This was not a death so much as a replacement. It is a cold comfort to realize a story wants a different you. You hear the safety video in your cabin. So often it stops being a thing that means anything. A cheerful actor buttons a vest. A family lines up at the muster station. A camera pans across clean faces. In my version tonight, the pauses startled me. The dad in the video turns his head for half a second too long, as if listening for something outside the script. The child looks straight into the camera once and does not blink. And her cheeks are the kind of rounded that means the footage is older than the life jacket model she handles. A woman passes a frame, and I swear I saw her on channel 66 behind my shoulder. I told myself I would not open the door at 3:14. I would stand in the quiet and feel the seconds walk by and ignore the television when it tried to teach me a fate. The sticky note had not asked for courage, only obedience. I could do that much. When the minute hit, the speaker made a tiny tap that could have been nothing. The on-screen me raised her hand and set it flat to the glass. My own fingers twitched and did not move. The balcony handle in my real room quivered like someone had exhaled against it. Behind the wall, the hum refused to settle. On screen, me grew impatient in little ways that were mean. She cocked her head like I do when I am listening for a lie, and she smirked at me, a small curl that was not mine. The cabin on the television felt a degree closer, air thick enough to leave a thumbprint. When she spoke again, I saw a condensation bloom on the inside of the screen, a quick oval like a breath. The word she mouthed was open, and this time it matched my lips because I whispered it back without wanting to, just to feel what my mouth did with the shape. The peephole in my door had always been a little off. If you have traveled enough, you know how some hardware never sits right. The lens made the corridor too tall and too thin. Tonight it made an eye. The misalignment caught the light and turned it into a pupil. At 3:24, the television showed me put my eye to the peephole. The view on the screen looked back at myself from the other side. My own iris centered wrong. My own blink a half beat late. The part of me that had learned not to flinch at mirrors flinched anyway. I took 3 steps to the screen and put my palm against the glass. It thrummed like a voice box. I told it to stop. It did not. I told it I would not open the door. The on-screen me rolled her shoulders, impatience like a shrug. The balcony handle of my world rattled once, and then again with more confidence, as if the person on the other side had learned my threshold. A low laugh slid through the speaker in my own tone, and I hated it the way you hate the echo in an empty room that sounds like company. I did the unsafe thing politely. I unplugged the television from the wall and set the cord on the carpet like a sleeping snake. The screen blinked once, twice, and carried on without power. The hum behind the wall climbed into a note that made the air feel greased. You do not know how loud a room is until it fights you. I pulled the dresser forward an inch and felt the weight of the old wires sweat through the wood. Somewhere behind drywall, the storm had coaxed a system awake that remembered how to work without being asked. I picked up the little plastic wastebasket and threw it as hard as I could at the screen. It struck without drama. Old glass has a way of accepting blows like weather. Cracks spidered out and held. The picture dipped and swam, then stabilized inside the web like a living thing that knew how to heal. On screen, me touched the fractured glass from within and left fog prints that were almost hands. I stood with my fists up, which is ridiculous in front of a television, and told myself I was not about to cry over damaged rental electronics. You asked for a choice, and here it is. I went to the breaker panel in the closet, and through every switch my fingers could find, the cabin blinked out of being, light first, then sound, then the small fan rhythm that convinces your body the air is kind. The window became black. The hum stayed. The screen glowed as if it had learned to drink from the dark. In the glass, my reflection moved a fraction ahead of me, a little puppet who knew the cue. It smiled again in that misfit way and touched the balcony handle I had not touched. Something knocked softly from the television. 3 taps in a rhythm that suggested please. The peephole, I blinked again, this time in my world. I stepped back because I am not brave enough to put my face that close to myself. The sticky note on the bed slid an inch without being touched, ink shining as if it had just been written. Do not watch past 3:14. The time on my watch said 3:26. Rules had been broken. The story was going to collect. I thought about all the ways a person could be replaced without dying. I thought about blank profiles and photos no one remembers taking. I waited for the on-screen me to open the door and end it. She did not. She had learned I was stubborn. She looked toward the peephole instead. The way a cat shifts when a sound joins a room you cannot hear. I felt the drawdown in my stomach, like a plane descending. The hum dropped a half step back. The television breathed inward. On the bed, the sticky note went blank for a second like a page flashing. A whisper in my own voice threaded out of the speaker and said it is easier if you let me. I went to the door and slid the metal cover over the peephole, so the eye had nothing to see. The cover stuck halfway, then ceded with complaint. The corridor made a low sound like someone walking in socks. On-screamy tilted her head toward the door in a gesture I recognized from videos of animals who know food is coming. Her smile softened. It did not get kinder. She moved to the edge of the frame and her hand rose slow, as if waving goodbye. The balcony handle in my real room settled and held still. Dawn is a technicality at sea. The light turns gray, then blue, then white, and people use the color they like. The power came back with a shrug that made the lamps blink and the thermostat wake, and the little fridge restart with a guilty cough. The television went blank in the polite way. The remote skipped from 65 to 67 like a magician, showing you nothing in a hand that might hold a coin. My neighbor greeted me in the hall like the night had been ordinary, and then said she must have been wrong about voices, except she could not get one whisper out of her head. Open, she said as if practicing. Guest services answered on the first ring, and told me there had been no cabin issues overnight. They apologized for my poor sleep and offered coffee, which I took, because kindness is a little boat. When I returned to my room, a new sticky note lay on my pillow, crisp and warm, ink wet. Do not watch past 3:14. The handwriting belonged to a person who could be me if I had chosen a different slant in 7th grade. I put it in the drawer with the first one and found that the first one had unwrinkled itself like it had always been new. I cleaned the glass with a tissue because smudges make me itch. The tissue came away clean. I stood at the balcony and listened to the storm pretend it had never met me. The hum in the walls had learned silence. I turned the television to the safety video and watched a family smile at a signal, and a dad point to a life jacket and a child twist a strap. At the edge of a frame, I saw a blur that could have been a person stepping out of line. Hair in their face, mouth set like mine when I am trying not to think. In the daylight, reflection behaves. You look at your face and it comes when called. I flipped channels idly to prove the day had won. 63 showed a cooking segment with a pan too shiny to be trusted. 64 showed a promo with sunsets you can buy. 65 showed documentaries with whales that moved like planets. The remote hop skipped to 67 and showed weather loops with bright arrows that pretended to predict. The black between 65 and 67 held for the space of a breath. In that black, my face lingered smiling after I had looked away. If you have ever been told not to do a small thing and then felt the pull of it like a tide, you know the shape of this. The sticky note is only a piece of paper. The hum behind the wall is only electricity remembering a song. The eye in the peephole is only a trick of lenses. That is what I say when I am brave. At night, I place the remote inside the drawer on top of the notes and shut it with a firm slide. In the morning, the drawer is sometimes open by an inch, the notes neat, the remote warm. I left the incident report on the desk until housekeeping took it or it vanished. Neither happened. The paper stayed and yellowed at the edges like a bruise. The signature at the bottom darkened as if ink learns to dry twice. Deceased is a word that loses meaning if you measure against breath. I am here. I am writing. I am not in the save video, as far as I can prove. When the corridors go quiet and the ship coughs a little and the air tastes faintly of ozone, I stand with my palm flat on the television and wait for it to thrum. If you are in a cabin someday and the remote hops a number and your neighbor mentions voices that count, do what you like. I am not your mother. If a sticky note appears that you did not write, take it seriously. If a technician arrives and you do not find him again in the logs, say thank you and show him out. When the clock reads 3:14, you will have the only kind of choice that matters. You can open a door and meet the version of yourself that chose quicker, or you can stand very still and wait her out. The ship prefers people who answer fast. The system loves a voice that obeys. Sometimes at night, I hear the operator's calm tone fold through ductwork, and I know she did not say it live. Do not tune it, she says, in a voice that sounds like mine after a long day. I turn away and I talk to you instead, because stories are the opposite of doors. If you feel a hum right now, that is only the way a room remembers someone in it. Story 4. Wake Without a Body to Wake was set for midnight. Velvet cloth laid across a coffin shape on trestles, incense hiding in a tea light, while diesel sighed through vents and the ocean tapped a patient rhythm against steel. The families stood in their crews were made solemn by black ribbons. I unlocked cold storage to bring them what dignity the protocol allows. The drawer for guest Alvarez slid out like a tongue and showed me clean sheet metal. No body, only the square shadow where weight had been. The PA above us cleared its throat and announced all passengers present, as if it counted the dead and found no one missing. My name is Dr. Simon Vale, ship's medical officer. My job is to make sure a small city afloat keeps breathing and to behave with unshakable calm when it does not. There are rules for rare deaths at sea, rules for the words you say and the papers you sign. And I used to like rules because they hold. We are 4 days from port. The family has already chosen hymns. If I fail, I become a story told in shore meetings with my name spoken politely. I checked the console again and found my digital signature approving a release I had not made. The timestamp looked back at me like a dare. Unknown before danger. The drawer mouth yawned and kept its silence. I keyed the audit. The biometric log blinked my name and thumbprint at 23:37, as if I come early and lifted a body I did not lift. The camera in cold storage gives you a view that flattens shape. Tonight it showed only a silver room and a condensation line, on stainless like a necklace. A glass of wake wine trembled on the counter above, as if the ship exhaled through it. In the wake guest book, ink entries lay smeared hours later like the letters still wet. My stethoscope hung cold around my neck and breathed its own fog. I carried protocol in my mouth while I carried sandbags in my hands. We wait a coffin when we must. We do not call it pretending. The family would stand, and we would speak softly, and we would lean into ritual while engines beat the hour. I set the sandbags inside the drape box and called it ballast. A child in a neat black ribbon stood on her toes to see the cloth. The velvet made a little ripple, as if air moved under it. The girl drew back and whispered that she had seen her grandfather smiling on the promenade by the chain rail. The PA told us again, all passengers present, in a voice that did not blink. I went to surveillance because a camera is a kind of truth, even when it lies. The feed from the deceased cabin stuttered at each attempt to open the door from inside, a glitch that looked like a shutter bridal veil across the entry. Security logs recorded an entry at 22:51 from a crew car that matched mine, timeways overlapping my presence in clinic. On one angle, I heard my own voice consoling the family at their door, a tenderness I reserve for late nights and hard medicine. which would have been reassuring if my mouth in that hour had said nothing of the kind. I returned to the wake with a voice I had rehearsed for classes and captains. There is a way to tell the truth that preserves what can be preserved. It did not help that the wine glasses along the rail of the buffet tipped at slow intervals, one, then another, thin stems bowing to a toast no hand raised. The family noticed and smiled through tears, because that is what family does when impossible aligns with the story they want. I asked them if anyone had visited their cabin this evening. They thanked me for coming earlier and for the words I said about a tide of souls. I had said none of it, but something wearing my name had. We closed the doors because wind steals voices. The PA chimed twice. All passengers present, Dr. Simon Vale confirmed. The room made a small shift around my name, as if the floor had learned my gait. I looked at my stethoscope and saw a breath unfold inside the bell. I pinched the tubing and felt a heartbeat against my palm. For a second I blamed the hum of refrigeration, and then remembered the drawer was empty. The condolence cards curled at the edges from heat they had not been near. The captain answered my call and told me in the even tone we use when we already know the answer to let the ritual finish, or it will not stop. Loss is supposed to be simple if the steps are followed. Lately, steps feel like chalk on wet deck. I tried to pull the manifest, and the system crashed in a polite gray box that said, "Please try again." When I asked for historical deaths, the ship thought so hard the cursor shook. The family began to call me Dr. Departed in lowercase affection, as if I escorted people across an unseen hallway for a living. Immediate consequences are bracing. The printer near my desk wheezed a life and spat a fresh death log using my template. Guest, Simon Vale. Cause, undetermined. Time of death, 001. The lid of the empty coffin creaked like someone inside had turned over. I grabbed what medicine I had left. The only tool that mattered in that minute was the oldest. My stethoscope beaded with condensation, as if someone had breathed on it. I slid the bell under the cloth and listened to emptiness and heard a slow heartbeat learn the room. You could accuse me of wanting it. You would be partly right. Sometimes the only way to end a hallucination is to trace it until it confesses. The guest book in front of me held names that did not belong to this ship, water-warped signatures of people lost on past voyages. Their ink shone with a thin skin like it had been written underwater and lifted out. The red herring came dressed in common sense. A staged disappearance. A future lawsuit. A family playing grief for leverage. Their glances were rehearsed. Their phrases clean. The insurance numbers in my head moved like an abacus. Then the records told a different plane story. Guest Alvarez had died on a previous voyage in heavy weather between nowhere and nowhere. His body was never recovered. The family returned each year to hold a wake the way a person returns to the shore where they last saw someone in case the ocean reconsiders. The ship had learned to accept rituals as maintenance. It had also learned what to do with incomplete paperwork when a crew signature could complete it. The ticking was a soft thing. The incense candle struggled in moist air. The engines beat midnight, and then one, and someone shivered. For days the port can be very long when a ritual roams. I cued to him. I told the steward to pour, and not be afraid when the glasses moved again. I let the family see me step to the coffin and sign the release because they need proof that someone carries the weight. The PA breathed once. All passengers present. The phrase had teeth now, and I felt them in my wrist. Point of no return is a quiet signature. I sealed the coffin with the brass locks that keep lid to base. I signed the manifest that should have been signed at the beginning and pressed my thumb. I ordered the pallbearers I had borrowed from housekeeping to shoulder the weight that was mostly sand. The family exhaled as one, a small relief that let air back into their faces. The PA announced body accounted for in a tone that sounded satisfied, as if arithmetic had finally cooperated. The room grew lighter in a way I did not trust. We took the coffin out under sky that had forgotten how to star. The deck was scrubbed to an honesty that squeaked underfoot. The rail was cold enough to warn. The ocean wore a thin chop like impatience. Passengers who had asked permission to attend could not stand still, the way people cannot at graduations and departures. The velvet cloth snapped once and lay flat. I set the ledger clipboard on a crate and held the pen as if it meant more than ink. I told myself I would look inside out of respect, not because fear wants to be fed. I lifted the lid the width of 2 fingers. I saw myself lying there as if I had been practicing. My coat had found my shoulders with no wrinkles. My face had the unlived look of a man who sleeps without weight. The stethoscope lay around my neck, and the bell fogged in a little bloom that matched the one I had seen earlier. There's a kind of terror that is all ice and no scream. The passengers behind me did not gasp. They leaned forward with the interest people bring to a good magic trick. The wine glass on the rail near the family trembled and tipped a clear arc into the ocean without spilling on deck. I looked away because I had to keep working. The PA made a satisfied click. All passengers present, head count balanced. The guest book beside me warmed and the older names on the wedding pulsed faintly, as if refreshed by blood under paper. The deceased's key card on the crate flickered under the scanner and printed a new legend with a polite beep. Simon Vale, it said, cabin code mine, and I could not pretend the ship was not naming me clearly. Choices tend to announce themselves, then wait to see whether you pretend not to hear. Here was the choice. I could let the coffin go with what looked like me inside and call the balance done, or I could step into it willingly and end the loop on terms that were not entirely theft. The difference sounds cosmetic when you speak it. It is not. One makes you a mistake. One makes you a decision. I wanted to keep walking. I wanted to keep writing prescriptions and telling sunburned honeymooners to drink water and telling myself I was more rule than man. The ocean hissed against steel and the rope on the winch creaked like an ankle. I put my hand on the coffin to close it. Cold fingers closed around my wrist with firm, familiar pressure. The way I grasp a pulse when I need the truth fast. The hand was mine if mine had been sleeping on ice. The grip asked a question I did not want to answer yet. The family watched without seeing the exact shape of my hesitation. The pallbearers shifted weight from heel to toe, strong enough to hold the world for 5 minutes and tired enough to resent it. The captain stood at my shoulder without touching me. His eyes were the soft gray of men who have learned to read bad weather on faces. I asked quietly for the stethoscope. The steward handed it over like a rope. I set the bell to the space under the velvet. The heartbeat inside the coffin matched mine in a call and echo that made me feel hollowed, like a bell hung where ribs should be. I checked the rail. White water reached and flattened. The wind smelled of rust and a hint of incense, which meant the candle gave up breath late. The PA stayed silent, as if content to listen. I counted to 3. I closed the lid with fingers that did not tremble. We slid the coffin to the rail and set the cradle bar. The family sang a line that wavered and found the note. The winch took slack. The pallbearer stepped back. The crate with the ledger thumped the deck in a way that will wake me at night later. I said the words. They are old and salt has preserved them. The coffin tilted, paused to reconsider, and then moved cleanly. If a city can sigh, the ship did. The sea opened to receive and smoothed over greedily, forgiving or pretending to. The velvet cloth clung, and then peeled away like a curtain that had finished its show. You ask if I felt myself fall. The answer is no, not in the sense you mean. I felt a quiet come over my breathing, as if a second set of lungs nearby had decided their work was completed. The PA did not play the phrase again. It did not need to. The family cried softly. Some looked relieved in the holy way that makes you kinder to them for a while. The captain nodded once, a small benediction or acceptance of liability. Someone placed a glass on a rail, and it tipped into the ocean and vanished before it could smash. Maritime courtesy, I thought, and then thought nothing for a heartbeat too long. Dawn came early in attitude, not light. The family found me near the clinic. With gratitude, they tried to make modern. They called me Doctor the Departed with no wink. Their shoulders hung lower by an inch. The wake room smelled of incense and lemon, and the steadier breath of a ship whose arithmetic finally pleased it. I went to morning roll call and watched the crew line up with the bored discipline of people who have learned to pass inspection like weather. My name was read as absent. The manifest remark column held one word: buried at sea. Cabin assignment moves fast when the ship is full. By noon, my key card stopped opening my door and began to open nothing at all. Then it opened only the storage closet wherein used linens wait. I kept it anyway because I have a poor sense of when to let objects go. Security found me to collect a signature on a form I had already signed in a hand that looked tired. They apologized for the condolence they would send to my shore contact. I told them not to, and they nodded like a man nods at tide. I went back to the wake room because grief leaves crumbs. The guest book lay where we left it. A new page had been added with a neat curl. Fresh ink wrote my name, Simon Vale, and the signature wobbled as if written in a moving vehicle or underwater. The paper felt cool. The line above mine read the deceased name in a hand that matched the family's. I looked for the smear of wetness that would prove fresh pen, but the ink sat dry and a little shiny like a shell on a windowsill. The room was empty except for the soft clink of glassware remembering hands. I kept the stethoscope because every good story needs a foolish token. At odd hours, a thin film coats the bell, and when I breathe on it, the haze clears to show nothing helpful. When I pass the promenade at night, I see a man who wears my coat watching the scene where ship meets sea, and he does not turn when I speak because we have no need of each other's eyes. The PA says all passengers present when the fog curls and thins, and I count to make sure I still know the numbers that matter. The red herring still visits sometimes. It would be easier to think the family planned a con, that the ship indulged them, that nothing touched me except formality. It never fits quite right. The surveillance that glitched when the cabin door opened from inside learned to hold steady after the wake. And if I pause the frame at 22:51 the night before, I see my shoulder pass the lens smoothly and the angle of my head, that means I am promising too much. The log file no longer fights my attempts to read it. It accepts and displays. It looks finished, which is a kind of lie. I have begun to speak to you in the late hours because this is the time stories going easy. If you sail long enough, you collect small rights. The coin you toss, the rail you touch, the knot you always retie. The sea loves repetition because repetition is a charm. The wake is a charm. If you ever find yourself asked to conduct one, and the drawer is empty and the PA insists the count is perfect, remember that balance is not always kind. Do the job clean, sign clean, hold the glass when it tips. When the engine beat settles into a long hum that feels like a heartbeat learning patience, I sometimes think I hear a second bell somewhere below the waterline, faint and regular and patient. It is probably metal cooling or pipe sing-song. It is probably my own blood in my ears. You will think what you want. On the corkboard outside the safety office, a faded page hangs with my name in modest letters among others who are not coming to muster. The thumbtack is blue and crooked. Someone will straighten it, thinking they are helping, I am here enough to walk. I am not here enough for the manifest. I do not recommend this state, but it is tidy. If you feel a hand close around your wrist while you do something you do not want to do, but have decided to, answer with the pressure you would give a patient who needs you to say, "We are doing this together." That is how the ocean lets go of what it keeps, if it lets go at all. Story 5. The tender that never docked at dawn. A tender appeared out of the mist with its lights on and its engine ticking like a cooling heart, the kind of sound metal makes when it remembers heat. No one had launched a tender. The lines dripped clean. The rails were slick with dew that smelled of gasoline and salt. I stood at the ramp while the water lifted and set the boat like a hand rocking a cradle, and listened for voices that could not be there. Somewhere in the fog, a crowd whispered all aboard as if saying grace. I am Naomi Hart, junior officer on tender duty until I prove I deserve something else. That means clipboards and headsets and the authority to stop a vacation from turning into a story people tell badly on shore. I have made small mistakes this contract, the kind you correct with apologies and candy for the crew, and my captain is patient in the way that makes you work harder. When the tender drifted against our fenders uncalled, he said it was mine to handle. When I asked for a deckhand, he asked me to show him I could stand. The first wrong detail was neatness. Inside the boat, the life jackets sat in tidy rows, straps crossed like slick orange arms, each seat numbered with careful marker. No passengers, but the manifest printer on the console had spit a roll of names that curled on the floor like ribbon, every seat signed out. The foam of our wake lapped the transom as it delighted at a game. I felt the way you feel when a room has been cleaned by someone who knows you too well. If you have ever found your own handwriting where it should not be, you know why my skin prickled. I powered the console to check the log, and it printed anyway, with power or without, as if the tender had learned to speak to itself. Passenger list followed crew list, followed timing, and on the third page my name appeared. Officer Naomi Hart, launch approval, 2:14. At 2:14 I was asleep with one shoe still on, because I am that kind of tired. The old analog clock bolted above the wheel showed its hands stiff at the same minute, as if time had walked to the edge and leaned. The fuel gauge read full even though the hour's log said running. Unknown before danger. The crew on watch swore they had heard voices carrying over the water while the mist was thickest. "We are late," the voices called, and then the sound went thin as if pinched. Damp footprints patterned the ramp in a neat line up and back, each print watering the metal to a darker gray before fading. I called the captain for an extra pair of eyes, and he said, "Admire it on your own time. You signed it, you close it." I did not say I had not signed anything. He had the paper that said I had. A steward from Deck 7 hurried down to me with a complaint in his hands like it might spark. A passenger had filed it under my name, time-stamped 2:14, alleging I promised him safe passage to shore on Tender 7. The seat on the ticket was circled in red. 13. When I slid the paper back across the counter, I felt something in my pocket that had not been there when I dressed. It was an embarkation stub stamped Tender 7. Seat 13, folded once along a crease that felt old. The ink bled a little at the edges like something that had learned wet and dry. I did the sensible thing that never helps in stories like this. I checked CCTV. The monitors showed a silent procession under night lights, a string of shadows that had the courtesy to cue. Leading them down the gangway was a woman in a safety vest whose posture I recognized from photographs that make me cringe. She moved like she had borrowed my spine. She wore my badge. She turned once and smiled with my mouth at a child clutching a tote bag. Halfway down the gangway, a young woman with careful hair lifted her face to the camera and waved as if she knew the lens. Her name was Sophie. She should have been asleep on Deck 8. When I checked my cabin door log, it said I had gone out at 2 o'clock and returned at 2:30. I had no memory of cold air, no damp on the carpet, no friend watching me leave. I asked security if anyone else had access to my card, and they told me, kindly, that a car will always say what the system wants it to say when a launch needs approving. The tender's radio crackled then, and layered voices for a moment into a rope I could not untie. All aboard, a dozen mouths whispered, and the words felt like breath on the back of my neck. I stepped into the tender because standing back felt like saying yes to the thing I had not chosen. Radios on the console stuttered, then settled into a loop that said exactly the wrong sentence. Tender 7 returning. Tender 7 returning. The engine compartment smelled like clean fuel and damp rope. No rot, no mold. The freshness of a room made ready for guests you cannot see. I checked the digital passenger log because numbers will sometimes lie with their eyes open. It printed again and again until I pulled the paper, and it tore like a scream. My handwriting signed the bottom. I do not sign with loops. The loops look like mine anyway. Night inspection is a corridor that never ends. I walked it with a guard everyone calls Jim because every night guard is Jim if you do not learn names fast enough. He leaned over the rail and said he thought he saw the tender move though our lines held tight. Water clicked into the hull with the soft insistence of a dog going from bowl to bowl. We stopped to listen. The voices on the water repeated a muster roll in a rhythm that was almost song. When I looked down, my reflection floated an inch left of me and lifted its hand to wave before I thought to wave back. Jim promised to fetch the chief bosun. He disappeared between one step and the next. Not a scream, not a stumble. He walked into fog as ordinary as a sigh and did not return. The tender console printer whirred where I had left it and added his name to the manifest with a small, satisfied chirp. I called the bridge, and my headset spat the same phrase as if it had rehearsed too long. Tender 7 returning. The captain came on long enough to say, "You signed it, you close it," then fell away into static. I listened to the deck creak like ribs. Somewhere below, a rope strained and begged. Isolation is not just being alone. It is staying reachable by the wrong things. My key card opened nothing except the tender. My cabin door blinked red, and then did not blink at all. Someone filed a second complaint under my name for waking their family at 2:14 to tell them they would miss their excursion if they did not hurry. The phrasing was mine, the kind I use when I need people to move. I went back to the tender to prove it had no more to say, and there in a plastic crate sat a stack of mustard bracelets, all pinging faintly when I lifted the lid. They were clean. They were dry. They did not belong here. I climbed the ladder to the archives because the ship keeps its own memory in boxes with soft corners. You learn to expect spiders and find paper instead. In a log with pages stuck from damp, I found tender 7 mention in a hand that wrote like a man who had sailed too long. Capsize outside port. No survivors. Erasure orders followed. I read the sentence twice because the word erasure has a taste. The next pages were missing, torn clean with the professionalism of shame. The schedule board on the wall leaned crooked, and the slot for 2:14 held a faded slip with my last name written as if by a teacher. I thought then that the tender was a ghost vessel seeking passengers to fill its doomed seats. It fit, and I wanted to fit, because a ghost that wants something simple is a problem you can hand off to a priest or a protocol. Each time I counted the manifest, it came up one short. Each time the printer tried again, as if willing a person into existence by carbon copy. I told myself I would find the one. Then I found me. The missing seat was mine. The phantom Naomi in the log was a version you get when you obey quickly. The tender horn sounded without a hand on the button. Ropes went taut and sang. The boat leaned against its lines with the eagerness of a dog at a door, paws light, ready to run when someone says go. The old clock over the wheel stayed locked at 2:14, even as my watch ticked toward a day people ashore could name. I stood on a ramp and let the mist bead my eyelashes and made a decision that would sit in the throat of my life. If a story wants you, pick your seat. If you do not, it chooses for you. I boarded Tender 7. The system accepted me with a polite chime that sounded like the satisfaction of a spreadsheet. All passengers accounted. The console said in letters that felt thick. The hatch slid shut at my back with the relaxed confidence of a door that has closed this way before. The smell inside shifted from gasoline to a sweeter note, like oranges left too long in a net. The life jacket seemed to breathe in, then out, straps loosening and tightening as if someone was settling. Silence arrived like a guest of honor and sat. I sat in seat 13 because the ticket in my pocket had asked me to, and because refusing a number makes it hunt you. The engine came alive without my hand. Water under the hull churned black, without showing what made it move. The old clock did not try to follow. The digital readout flickered between now and then like an eyelid. The tender edged off our hull exactly as far as our lines allowed, and then waited, a dog told to stay by a voice it loves. I felt the gaze of the ship on my back and the patience of the sea in front. Passengers arrived in the wave fog, discovers faces, one by one, each seat filling with a person who looked at me as if I called them by name. Their clothes were wrong in small ways. Logos of cruise lines that folded. Ticket lanyards bleached to ghost colors. Water beaded at the ends of hair and never fell. I knew a few from the memorial drawer in the safety office. The one people avoid dusting. A man lifted 2 fingers to me in a hello that asked for nothing. A child counted under her breath and smiled when she hit a number that felt right. They settled as if rehearsals were over. Then I saw myself. I was already strapped and across from me, posture neat, hair pulled back and away. I make it when I need to look unbothered. The double tilted her head and gave me a small, sympathetic smile I would never have offered myself. "You were late," she mouthed. I do not read lips well, but I felt the words in the angle of her jaw. Behind her, droplets patterned the bench in a trail that matched the footprints on the ramp. A neat series of exits and returns that knew my shoe. Seats closed loops. The old clock stayed at 2:14, like a held breath. The fuel gauge did not move. The voices outside the hull recited names in a cadence I could have mistaken for him if I wanted to make it pretty. In the console reflection, the water showed my face again, a fraction ahead. She lifted her hand before I did and placed her palm on the glass, as if checking its temperature. Under my legs, the seatbelt was damp, not cold, like cloth that had learned to body. I thought of the passenger who had dreamed of boarding a boat that never arrived and found arriving here punctual as a curse. Choice pressure narrows the world to 2 doors. I could unbuckle and fight a version of myself that did not need breath. Or I could sit still and become the missing number that balanced a ledger I did not author. The tender's lines groaned as if offended by indecision. The double watched me the way a mirror watches a person test their smile. I thought of the captain telling me to close what I had signed. I thought of promotion boards and elbows out and the way my name sounds when said proudly into a radio. I thought of how soft the word all is when you say all aboard. I tightened the belt. The double nodded as if we had settled a friendly bet. The rope snapped in a sequence that felt like a taut instrument. The tender slid into the fog with the relief of a door shut on noise. The ship vanished in 3 breaths. The water laid itself flat and then grew new ripples from nowhere. The engine took us forward without moving, a trick you only feel if you have sat in rooms like this and learned the math of stillness. Behind my ribs a metronome I had not consented to own clicked and held. No one spoke. It was the courtesy of a waiting room before good news and bad. The man with the two-finger hello closed his eyes and let his head bump the window softly, counting the beats. The child stopped at the number she wanted and tucked her hands under her thighs like children do when they want to prove they can be still. My double looked past me to the place where the ship would be, as if she remembered better than I do. The horn sounded once, low and pleased. It felt less like a departure than an arrival that happens in the throat. Mourning is political. It appears when someone in charge agrees to call it that. The tender tied itself again, lines playing through cleats in quick, tidy hands I could not see. When the hatch opened, there was only the shift of air a room makes when released. The seats were empty, straps resting neat, one belt damp where my knees had been. I stood too fast, and the boat answered by swaying once, like laughing. On deck, the captain looked past me to the water and lifted his chin. Behind him, the crew moved like people who have set the table again. My cabin had been reassigned before I reached it. My key card opened a linen closet with a pride that made me want to apologize to towels. The tender manifest on the console showed a simple sentence. All 50 accounted. No names. The list had collapsed into a clean number, like a math problem to see finished, while leaning on one elbow. On the tender hull, salt had dried to a line I could have mistaken for a scraping if I needed to feel useful. Footprints led up the ramp and around the corner toward my old corridor before they gave up and vanished in dry. The crew logbook is a heavy thing that misplaces itself when no one is looking. I found it on the bridge where it should not live. My signature on the tender line faded and returned every few minutes, as if written in ink that had not learned to pick a state. When it went pale, you could see the paper under it, a scratch of fiber like skin. When it came back, it grew darker at the loop of the N and the bar of the H, the parts my hand presses harder when I am trying to be neat. I still hear the phrase, all aboard sometimes when the fog knocks. It tucks itself into the spaces between words when the captain checks weather and uses the calm voice all of us hoard. It rides the PA at odd hours when no one admits to touching the mic. At 2:14, the analog clock above the wheel in tender 7 sticks for a breath, and then remembers what it owes the minute. You will ask if I dream of the double. I do. And she is kinder than I am, and she always arrives on time. If you ever find a tender waiting with its engine warm, and the lines damp and a printout curling like ribbon on the floor, remember this. Neatness can be a trap. Politeness can be a current. If someone files a complaint with your words in it, decide quickly whether they are borrowing your voice or returning it. When the water shows you your face a second before you lift your head, you have been seen. If a captain tells you to close what you did not open, learn whether the sea is asking for your signature or your seat. I am telling you this late, because late is when the ship sounds honest. The ropes tick and sigh. The hull flexes and pretends it is not. The mist wraps the tender's windows as if testing for breath. I walk the ramp and touch the rails and feel the old glue of dried salt. Somewhere, a printer wakes like a small creature and spits a single name into a list. If it is yours, pick your seat and at least make it look like a choice. If you're still with me, the ship has let you disembark for now. Maybe you can taste the lemon polish in the air or hear the engines humming like a slow heartbeat beneath the floor. 5 stories, 5 wrong turns at sea, and somehow we found our way back to the gangway. Cabin 414 will keep its red-green blink. Deck 13 will wait until the fog is thick enough to hide a crowd. Channel 66 will pretend it doesn't exist. The wait will set its velvet cloth again. And Tender 7 will always know your name if you hesitate. Thank you for sailing into the dark with me tonight. If any moment followed you out of these halls, tell me which one and why. Was it the knock that comes at 2:14, the off-key muster tone, the smile your reflection practiced without you, the heartbeat in an empty coffin, or the seat with your number already printed? Your theories are the lifeboats we push into the comments. Be brave and launch one. If you're new to Whispering Abyss, I'm glad you boarded. I post fresh nightmares that feel as real as wet rope and cold brass, and I keep them friendly to platform but unfriendly to sleep. Tap like if the sea called your name tonight. Subscribe if you want a cabin key that works after midnight. Ring the bell, and I'll save you a seat the next time the deck you can't find opens by itself. Before you go, a little travel advice for anyone cruising soon. If your remote skips from 65 to 67, turn the TV off and face the mirror until your reflection blinks first. If the PA counts a muster you don't remember, keep your head down and your name to yourself. And if you ever find a tender already warm with a manifest curling on the floor, choose your seat quickly, or the sea will choose it for you. I'll be back with more whispers from the water. Until then, sleep with the curtains open, just in case the morning needs proof you were here. And if you hear a soft bell at exactly 2:14, don't be alarmed. It's only the ocean checking its list. Good night, and keep your life jacket where you can reach it.